Welcome back to Behind the Caution Tape. I'm your host, CrashLit, recording out of the Surf House on 29th Street in University Park. It's been a busy week for USC athletics, but before we get into it, let's just talk about the fact that I now have my own website, crashlit.com, where you can see all my work that I've done with reporting stuff and just learn more about me and what I'm trying to do in this space. So it's very USC focused and it's just a great place to learn more about what I want to do. So let's get into some USC football news first to start. And before we even get into the games, and USC was off last weekend, let's talk about just everything that's been going on because it's been a busy week. On Wednesday, USC had its early signing period on and with Houston Longstreet upholding his commitment to USC, definitely the most notable commitment, especially after Julian Lewis decommitted from the Trojans not too long ago. But still definitely a big pickup there for the Trojans to felt some depth in the quarterback room, especially with Miller Moss and third stringer Jake Jensen now in the transfer portal. On Wednesday as well, assistant head coach for defense and linebackers coach Matt Entz left that day to take the Fresno State head coach job. And even though it did cause a few defensive players to flip their commitments from USC on signing day, I think in short term it hurts USC. I think long term, I think it actually makes head coach Lincoln Riley look good, especially because it just shows that he's hiring good coaches who are, in turn coming to be turning into head coaches, which I think is what you want as a head coach, is to see your assistants make that level. Even if short term it does hurt, you see all the great ones do it. Like, look at all the number of coaches that Nick Saban has produced from Alabama. And so for those reasons, you can't even blame him for it. And especially it seemed like he was trying to get into the FBS after leaving his pretty good job at North Dakota State, I'd say, considering he won 2 national titles there during his time there. But definitely, I think it's going to be a long-term, it's going to make USC look good, even if it does hurt now. And Riley did say that he does not expect any more staff changes aside from Entz, so we'll see who he decides to replace in the linebacker room there to help the Trojans out. Then as of today, also 8 football players are in the portal. As I mentioned, Miller Moss is there. And also another notable name that entered in the past week is Kyron Hudson, wide receiver, had those crazy Odell-like catches in that game against LSU to start the season. So we'll see who else enters over the past month with the portal now open. Big Ten also last week announced their all-conference teams, and 13 Trojans were selected. And it was most highlighted by punter Eddie Czaplicki, who made the first team and was named to the Big Ten, made the first team and was named the Big Ten Edelman Fields Punter of the Year for his impressive ability to pin teams deep in their own territory. And I think he seldom gave up touchbacks. He had a streak going for a while that I think, as far as I remember, ended against Notre Dame when he finally got kicked one a little too far into the end zone. But overall, an impressive year from Czaplicki and really helped USC's defense out a lot. And then yesterday, USC did find out its bowl game. So Trojans are headed back to Allegiant Stadium to take part in the SRS Distribution Las Vegas Bowl against Texas A&M. The Aggies went 8-4 this year. It's a pretty good year, I'd say, for the most part, under first-year head coach Mike Elko. Definitely a turnaround, it seems like, from the Jimbo Fisher days. But Aggies did have some bad losses down the stretch and did finish the regular season on a 2-game losing streak. And like USC, their previous quarterback, Connor Wigman, is now in the portal after being benched in favor of Marcel Reed. So similar situation. So kind of find that interesting now. Trojans are going to Vegas. They're playing this bowl game, but then also it's 2 quarterbacks with Jade Mayava and Marcel Reed who are now going to be pitted against each other after initially starting the season on the bench. So, but anyways, this game, sure, it's definitely not what anyone was hoping for, but it's definitely big for, momentum for next year and the ability to test out a lot of young guys. And it's still unclear who exactly is going to sit out in preparation of the NFL draft or finish the right. And I mean, I've heard a few names. It sounds like linebacker Eric Gentry, who redshirted this year due to a series of concussions, is going to be back. And it sounds like, and the rules are he can do that, even though the bowl game does not count against the 4 games that are counted as a bowl counted towards having to redshirt the maximum of 4 games you can play before redshirting. So that'll be a big pickup for Gentry to get back. And he was definitely one of the people who's definitely most bummed about Matt Entz leaving because it sounds like Entz really helped develop him and just really helped him fit with the defense in a way that sounds like the previous defensive regime at USC under Riley did not. But then also it sounds like I think I read Kamari Ramsey, even though it sounds like he's going to declare for the draft, still wants to play one more game with USC. So it sounds like he will be taking part in the Vegas Bowl. Last I read, that could change, however. So it's just all about getting momentum, testing out young guys. For a lot of the older guys who might be playing their last game, chance to go out on a high note. But I think this is probably the biggest game, one of the biggest games for Jaden Mayava since he's looking to get reps for next year to prove he can be the guy in the start. He's the only scholarship player on the roster with Moss and Jensen in the portal. And with Houston Longstreet coming in, Mayava's going to definitely have to fend him off. And Riley did also say that he plans to add a quarterback from the transfer portal. So what caliber of a quarterback and who that's going to be, that remains the question. If it's going to be a younger underclassman or an experienced veteran upperclassman remains to be seen. But definitely just a big game for USC to try to finish the season on a high note and finish with a winning record and get to 7-6 and just have a lot of momentum coming into next year. So men's water polo now is our next topic, and they were playing for the national championship yesterday, actually. So leading up to that, they beat Cal Baptist 17-13 on Friday, Fordham on Saturday, 18-16 overtime, and lost to UCLA yesterday 11-8. So that was the national championship being hosted by Stanford, so up in Palo Alto. We'll start with the CBU game real quick. Robert Lopez Duarte and Carson Kranz each led with 4 goals in a game that saw CBU start out hot before USC stormed back to take control. And definitely Trojans were able to put them away, but definitely a little stressful at first against Fordham, who was undefeated prior to Saturday. It was a back and forth affair all the way until the first OT period when USC pulled ahead for good and held on in the second OT. And then Andrej Grigurovich led with 5 goals against the Rams, who suffered their first loss of the season. It was a very competitive battle all the way through. So really impressive season from the Rams. I will give them credit for that. Especially, it doesn't matter. I'll say this, it doesn't matter what competition you play. If you can have a season at 32-1, I think, or just win over 30 games without losing before finally dropping one in the playoffs, that is a very impressive season. So that was a good win for USC. And then that leads up to a crosstown showdown rivalry national championship game where Trojans did unfortunately fall in an 11-8 battle. It's more of a defensive game. Lopez Duarte and Grigurovich led with 2 goals each. It was back and forth and tied for most of the first half. I ended up listening to this as I was driving home from Mammoth yesterday. UCLA gradually pulled ahead in the second half to win the national championship. So for their efforts, Lopez Duarte, Max Miller, and Bernardo Herzer all made the NCAA all-tournament team. USC finishes the season with a 23-6 record and a runner-up in the NCAA tournament. So definitely not the way that we hope the season would end, but a big congrats to men's water polo on an incredible season and just playing really well and just really gritting their way all the way to the final. Now turn to women's volleyball before we get into how they did in the first weekend how they did in the NCAA tournament. I'd like to quickly shout out Allie Batenhorst and Mia Tuaniga for making the Big Ten All-Conference first team, as well as Leah Ford for making the Big Ten All-Conference second team and the freshman team as well. And then also Gala Trubant, big congrats to her being named USC's sportsmanship honoree in the Big Ten. So now on to the results of how the game went. So Trojans swept UT Arlington on Thursday and lost at 3-seeded Texas, who is 13th overall. Both those games were in Austin and the Texas game was on Friday. So we'll start with UT Arlington. Allie Batenhorst led with 15 kills against the Mavericks. UTA was competitive in sets 1 and 3, and USC dominated set 2. So the final set scores were 26-24, 25-7, and 25-21. And you had to know that even though UTA was not ranked, that it was going to be a tough match because UTA ended up, like, this is kind of what I was saying about Fordham earlier. They were 29-2 when they entered the match, so they know how to win games. But credit for USC for blowing them out in the second, just finding a way to get the job done. Definitely wasn't easy, and I mean, UT Arlington did give them a fight at times, so good win to definitely start the NCAA tournament and get win number 22. Against Texas, however, Trojans were swept, as I mentioned. Batenhorst led with 17 kills against the Longhorns, and all three sets were pretty close. So even if though USC wasn't able to grab a set and they had opportunities too, it was still a really close match in my opinion. And it was really competitive throughout. Texas played a bit better, and it just appears, and it was tight despite the sweep. And USC had moments where ahead. And I mean, if you just look at Texas has been dominating the sport for a while now, and just they got good coach in Jarrett Elliott and one of the best, arguably one of the best players in the country in Madison Skinner. So definitely a tough way for the season to end. And during the loss, however, Allie Batenhorst surpassed the 1,000 career kill mark, and that does date back to her time with Nebraska over the previous 3 seasons. And Mia Tuaniga, a big congrats to her on becoming USC's all-time career assist leader. She passed Kendall Bateman, whose previous record was 4,510 assists, and Tuaniga will finish. And after the loss, Tuaniga after the game match against Texas over, Tuaniga will finished her career with 4,529. So big congrats to both Allie Batenhorst and Mia Tuaniga on surpassing really incredible milestones. They're just super impressive and inspiring to see. So the Trojans finished the season with a 22-10 record and a second round exit in the NCAA tournament. Definitely looking forward to seeing how the team responds to it this offseason. Looking forward to just seeing them get better, especially a lot of young talent on this team that can really help this team go far next season in Brad Keller's 6th season at the helm of USC women's volleyball. On to women's basketball now. So they beat Cal Baptist 94-52 on last Tuesday, and then they won at Oregon on Saturday. So 2 big wins for the Trojans with the to definitely get a Big Ten play started. And we'll start with the Cal Baptist game. Juju Watkins led with 40 points against the Lancers, and USC dominated throughout. And Watkins nailed a career-high 9 3-pointers. So every game, she just is constantly going off. And it is just so fun and impressive to watch. And then against Oregon, where the Trojans won 66-53. Watkins led with 21 points, and USC outscored Oregon 28-6 in the second quarter, which gave USC a comfortable lead to win the school's first Big Ten game. Or team's first Big Ten game since joining the conference, even though it was against a familiar Pac-12 foe. So USC now 8-1 on the year, 1-0 in Big Ten play on the season. They moved up from 6th place to 5th place in this week's AP poll, and USC proved it can. And so now pretty much with those games, USC needs to just get ready for, and pretty much now just USC needs to just take care of business against Fresno State, who is 7-3 on the season. That game will be on Tuesday at 6 p.m. on the Big Ten Network. And then Elon, who's 4-4, no connection to Elon Musk for anyone wondering, at least not that I'm aware of, but just kind of now just strikes me as an interesting name for a school. But anyways, I'm getting off track. They are 12 and on Sunday. That game will be at 12 p.m. streamed on the Big Ten Plus. And just USC needs to take care of business this week and be ready for the big away game at UConn that will happen on December 21st. So we're less than 2 weeks away from that. So USC just needs to finish this game strong and just figure out how to just make sure that you can bounce back and just not and try to get a good win over the Huskies, because that's going to be a tough game, especially on the road. And it's one of those games, as Lindsey Gottlieb said, where you can either get a good win or you get exposed. And I think the Trojans want to avoid the latter this time around and not try to suffer a similar fate as they did against the Irish. But definitely looking forward to being at both those games this week. On to men's basketball, our final team of the day. They lost against number 12 Oregon 68-60 last Wednesday, but then bounced back to beat Washington 85-61 on Saturday. So Desmond Claude led with 22 points against the Ducks. And overall, I thought USC played really well, but just they crumbled in the final like 5-ish minutes of the games. So really, that drew me to the conclusion of USC just needs to be able to finish games, especially when up 7 against a ranked opponent at halftime. That was just a tough ending to watch to a game that USC was in control for most of it. And really, it was just overall, I really liked how they played after just tough week last week in the Acrisure Classic over Thanksgiving. But then and then against Washington, USC won 85-61. Claude led with 20 points against the Huskies, and USC just dominated the first half, 51 to 25, to take control of the game early and win its first Big Ten game. And I just loved watching this game and just seeing how the team bounced back after a tough loss in the Big Ten opener and snapped a 3-game losing streak. So USC now sits at 6-4 in the season, 1-1 in Big Ten play. And up next, they will host Montana State on Sunday, their only game of the week at 5 p.m. on the Big Ten Network. And this will be former USC Trojan Max Agbonkpolo's return to USC for the first time in 3 years since graduating and playing for 3 different schools. He spent his 4th year of college at Wyoming, then he was at Utah State, and now in his final year with Montana State. So he's been bouncing around a little bit. Seems like he's starting to find his groove a little bit. I haven't been following Montana State too much, but definitely just caught my eye that he'd be returning to Galen for the first time since he left. But then overall, just USC needs to finish strong against its final 3 non-conference opponents. So Montana State tonight and then CSUN and Southern next week before diving all in on Big Ten play after Christmas. So last week I went 1-1. And that puts me at 36-12 on the season in terms of my win-loss record and 247-93 all time. And because for the most part all the fall sports are done, barring just what I decide to do if I go to the Vegas Bowl, and a lot of that's just going to depend on what's going on, family plans over the holidays. Here are the records right now, with the football one potentially changing by a game depending on what happens and if I go. Women's volleyball, I went 15-4 at games I attended. Football 6-3. Men's water polo 3-2 and women's soccer 3-0. And then this week for my plans, I plan to attend women's basketball against Fresno State tomorrow night, and then women's basketball against Elon and men's basketball against Montana State on Sunday. So that's all we got for you today. Make sure to follow me on social media at CrashLit, and also check out my new website, as I mentioned at the start, CrashLit.com. Just know what's going on with everything going on with USC Athletics. Looking forward to seeing you all at a game. Thank you again, everyone who's been tuning in. If you're enjoying this, please click that subscribe button or the follow, whatever it's saying on the platform that you are listening to or watching this on. So thank you again. Have a great week, everybody. Look forward to seeing you at a game soon, and fight on.